So, yesterday we were talking about how to deal with the death of a communal leader, and we stopped really in the middle of the Brisa. The Brisa then says, on line 3 of DAF Chaf Gimel Amud Aleph, Ve'in omrim shmua va'agada beveisa avel, that you're not supposed to really cite Torah teachings. A shmua, something that you had learned from your Rebbe, or an agada, some agadic passage. You're not supposed to make mention of Torah studies in the house of an Avel, but Amrul Avel, Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel, Shahya Omer Shmua va'agada beveisa Avel. Nonetheless, Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel did make mention of Torah studies in the house of an Avel. It sounds like Shmua v'agada sounds like something that's really light and in passing, not a full-blown shiur, but just teachings. And it's interesting because, there's a debate among poskim, even modern-day poskim, whether it's appropriate to learn between Mincha and Ma'ariv in the house of an Avel. So my Kabbalah is that we do, but there are others. I think Rav Soloveitchik was makbid that he felt it wasn't appropriate to say words of Torah study based on this Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, and now let's go to another brisa. Avel Shabbos Rishona Eno Yotzim Pesach Beisa. This is also something that we don't really see nowadays, which is an incremental alleviation of the Shiva over the course of the Shloshim. And it says as follows, that for the first week, he doesn't leave his house. That's during the Shiva. Shniya Yotze Ve'eno Yoshev B'Makomo Ve'eno Medaber. The second week, he can leave his house, but he should not sit in his regular seat in the social gatherings like in the shul, and he should not speak to other people. Shlishis, Yoshev b'makomo ve'eno medaber. The third week, he can already sit in his regular seat, but he should not speak to others. And Revius harehu kechol adam. And for the fourth week, he's considered to be like everyone else. It's the fourth week of the Shloshim, presumably. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Lo hutzruchu lomer Shabbos Rishona lo yetzim yipesach beiso, shreya kol nichnasin lebeiso lenachamo. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says there's no need to indicate to me that during the first week he doesn't leave his house. I mean, where else is he going to go? Everyone's coming to visit him to be Menachem Oval anyway. So therefore, that's the Bryce is being misquoted. Elo shniya eno yotzim yipesach beiso, but rather the halacha is as follows: the second week, he doesn't leave his house. The first week it goes without saying he doesn't leave his house because he's in Shiva. Second week, after Shiva is over, he also doesn't leave his house. Shlishis yotzei ve'enu yoshev b'makomo ve'enu medaber. The third week, he can leave his house, but he doesn't sit in his regular seat in the shul or other social places, and he does not speak to others. Revius yoshev b'makomo ve'enu medaber. The fourth week, he can sit in his normal seat, but he doesn't speak to others. And chamishis harehu kechol adam. By the fifth week, he's already like everyone else. Rabbi Yehuda just pushes things up an extra week. So again, as I say, we don't see this incremental alleviation put into practice. At least I haven't seen it. Tanu Rabbanan kol shloshim yom lenisuin. That the Brisa now says that for the shloshim, for the entire shloshim period, a man is not allowed to get married. Mesa ishto asur lisha Lisa Isha Acheres, if his wife dies, if he's sitting Shiva for his wife, then we're even more machmir out of respect to his deceased wife. And we don't allow him to get married at Shi'avrul of Shlosha Regalim until a full 3 Regalim elapse. Sukkos, Pesach, and Shavuos, depending upon what order, what time of year the Petira took place. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Regel Rishon V'Sheni Aser Shlishi Moter. Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient. He says, no, only 2 regalim have to elapse, but even before the third regel, he can get married. V'im ein lo banim muter lisa la'alter mishum bittul priya u'revia. But we saw this yesterday, that if a man had not yet fulfilled the mitzvah of pru'ervu, of having children, he's allowed to get married even in the middle of shloshim. Even if his wife had passed away. Like I said, we said that sounds a little bit cold, but at the same time, he's got a mitzvah to do. I got mitzvahs to do. So, I liked my wife. She was a nice lady, but got to go on to the next one. Okay.
So the woman?
No, woman doesn't have a mitzvah of pru'ervu.
But the same rule is applied. She has to wait 3 regal.
That's a good question. As far as her rewaiting, the Gemara doesn't address that issue. Gemara doesn't address it. Yeah.
I was going to say it's probably the same issue as someone Alan said, but Yivum, she has to wait a year before she does Yivum, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the Gemara says in Yavamas. We'll get to that very shortly. I don't know if the Gemara tells us about the timing. I don't remember anymore. Hinichalo banim ketanim mutar lisa la'alter mipnei parnasasan. And another dispensation about getting married right away, even within the shloshim, is if a man already fulfilled the mitzvah of pru'ervu, but his wife died leaving him small children to take care of. So he needs a mother for those children, and he's allowed to therefore get married in the middle of shloshim. Ma'aseh shemesa ishto shel Yosef HaKohen va'omer la'achosa b'veis hakvaros l'chiu parnasius b'nei achosech. Gemara even illustrates a story that the wife of Yosef HaKohen had passed away, and while he was in the cemetery, he said to his sister-in-law, his wife's sister, who was single, I'm going to marry you and you'll take care of the kids. And but nevertheless, he didn't consummate the marriage until sometime later. And Mailizman Meruba, and how much later was it? Amar of Papa la'achar shloshim yom. So he had a heter to marry her within the shloshim right away, but he could not consummate the marriage until after the shloshim was over, out of respect to his wife. Now, Tosfos also points out he couldn't get married in the middle of Shiva. He had to wait at least until after Shiva to get married. So what do we mean when he said to her at the Beis HaKvaros, at the cemetery? So Tosfos says it probably was a case where the Kavura was Erev Yantif. So therefore he was able to marry her immediately afterwards on Erev Yantif because the Shiva was over. Tana Rabbanan. Kol Shloshim Yom, now we have another halacha. Kol Shloshim Yom Legihutz, Echad Kelim Chadoshim, Ve'echad Kelim Yishonim, Yotzein Mitachas HaMichbash. The Brisa says for the first 30 days of Avelus, you're not allowed to wear clothing that have gone through the process of Gihutz. Gihutz is a very labor-intensive pressing process to make the clothes look finely pressed. And it's more elaborate than just laundering them. It's laundering them and then pressing them afterwards. And this is true both for new clothes and for old clothes. In both cases, they have to be removed from the press, and a person can't wear them if they've been in the press. Rabbi Omer lo asru ela kelim chadoshim bilvad. And Rabbi says, no, you can wear pressed clothing as long as it's not new. The only prohibition is new clothing. And Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon Omer lo asru ela kelim chadoshim levanim bilvad. Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon is even more lenient, and he says the only restriction is new clothing that's white. But if it's colored new clothing, so it's not as noticeable the fact that it's brand new and it's been freshly pressed, so then it's also okay. Abaya nafik begarda desar below kirebi. Abaya went out with a garment that had been freshly pressed, but since it was old, he was lenient like Rebbe, who said the prohibition is only on new clothing that's pressed. And Rava nafik bechimutsta rumisa sumkasa chadati kirabelazar Reb Shimon. And Rava was even more lenient. He went like Rabelazar Reb Shimon, who said that even new clothes that are pressed are permitted as long as they're not white. And that was why Rava went out with a shirt that was a Roman red shirt. I don't know why dafka Roman. It was some kind of style. It was a red Roman shirt that had been freshly pressed, and it was brand new, spanking new red shirt, straight off the rack, and it was freshly pressed. And he wore it even though he was in the middle of shloshim because it wasn't white. And because it wasn't white, he felt you could be lenient like Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon. Next, so now we go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah, if you recall, many days since we saw the Mishnah, had created a contrast between Shabbos and Yontif. Shabbos is part of the Shiva, plus once Shabbos is over, Shiva commences in its full intensity. On Yontif, the day of Yontif is not part of the Shiva, which means that if a person has a burial on Chol Moed, for example, he has to wait until after Yontif before the Avelus even begins, before the Shiva begins. Plus, if he's sitting Shiva and then Yontif comes, Yontif breaks the Shiva. Okay, these are the things that we know. That's a very common halacha that is well known. But now we have a machlokes about Shabbos itself. B'nei Yehuda v'nei Galila, we have sages, the Judean sages and the Galilean sages. Hani Amri, yesh avelus b'Shabbos, v'hani Amri, ein avelus b'Shabbos. One group says that the laws of avelus apply on Shabbos, and the other one says that the laws of avelus do not apply at all on Shabbos. Now everyone agrees that there's a diminution of avelus on Shabbos. But the question is there some aspect of Avelus that still is extant on Shabbos or not? So one group says yes, there's some Avelus that's still extant. We'll see what that is shortly. And the other group says that no, there's Bichlal no Avelus on Shabbos. Even though Shabbos doesn't break the Shiva, but there's Bichlal no Avelus whatsoever on Shabbos, and it just like is, you have like a 24-hour pass, and then it commences after Shabbos. Now, Manda Amar Yesh Avelus b'Shabbos de Katani Ola. Now, if you tell me, according to the opinion that says that there is Avelus on Shabbos, he says, well, I look at the Mishnah for my cue, because it says in the Mishnah that Shabbos is part of the Shiva. If Shabbos is part of the Shiva, like it says in the Mishnah, that must mean that there's some aspect of Avelus on Shabbos. But Mando Amar Ein Avelus b'Shabbos de Katani Ein Mafsekes. But the other opinion says, no, I look at the different part of the wording of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that Shabbos does not interrupt or stop, put to an end, the Shiva. So, Isal Kadaitach Yesh Avelus b'Shabbos, Hashda Avelus Nahaga Avsukim Ibaya. So he says, because what's my proof? If there is some Avelus on Shabbos, then why does the Mishnah have to tell me that it doesn't cause the Shiva to come to an end? If it itself is a day of Shiva, and there's some aspect of Avelus on it, then obviously it cannot cause the Avelus to come to an end. The only reason why you'd think that Shabbos could cause Avelus to come to an end is because it itself is not a day of Avelus. And so that's my proof, says the other opinion, that there is no Avelus on Shabbos at all. It's just that even though there's no Avelus on Shabbos, it commences after Shabbos is over. So ve'elaha kitani oila. So what is that opinion going to do with the word that it counts as part of the Shiva? How can it count as part of the Shiva if there's no Avelus on it? So the Gemara answers, Aidi de kaboy lemisna seifa in an olim tanaresha oila. It's just for parity, for consistency. That since the discussion of Yantif says that a death on Yantif will not allow the Shiva to start, so it says that on Shabbos that's not the case. On Shabbos, Shiva is considered to be part of the counting, right? But even though there's no Avelus on it, there's no Avelus at all, but nevertheless, to contrast it with Yantif, it is counted as part of the Shiva. Ulaman da'omar yesh Avelus b'Shabbos hakatani eina mafsekes. So let's go to the other opinion. If you tell me that there is some aspect of Avelus on Shabbos, why then was it necessary for the Mishnah to write that it doesn't cause the Shiva to cease? Obviously it doesn't, because it's part of the Shiva. There's Avelus on it. So obviously it doesn't interrupt the Shiva at all. So the Gemara answers, Mishum tikaboy lamisna seifa mafsikin tanaresha eina mafsikin. Also, the same answer for the consistency's sake, to show symmetry, since the contrast is Yantif, and Yantif actually does break the Shiva. It wants to tell you that Shabbos doesn't break the Shiva. Not because on Shabbos there's no Avelus, because there is some Avelus on Shabbos, but it's just for symmetry. We said, just like on Yantif, the Shiva is broken, on Shabbos the Shiva is not broken. The Gemara now says, okay, fine. So the language is sufficiently ambiguous in the Mishnah to sustain both opinions. But now, lema kitanai. Let us point to a brisa which seems to indicate this very same machlokes as to whether there's any aspect of Avelus on Shabbos or not. What does the brisa say? Misha mesa mutalafanav. This is a very famous Mishnah in Maseches Brachos, and it says that if a person has just suffered a death, and the corpse is right there with him in the house, okay, ochel b'bayis acher. He has to go to a different chamber or a different structure in order to eat, because there's an aspect of loeg l'rush, of mocking the dead by doing living activity in the presence of the dead. Okay? So therefore he's obligated to eat in another room. So ein lo bayis acher ochel beveis chavero. If he doesn't have another place to go in the house or in another house, he's got to go to a friend's house to eat. Ein lo beis chavero oselo mechitza asar tfachim. If there doesn't have a friend to go to, so then he's got to make a partition between himself and the corpse of 10 tfachim to create a division, and then he can eat. Ein lo davar lasos mechitza. What if he doesn't have anything with which to construct a partition? Machzir panav va'ochel ve'ino mesav. Machzir panav va'ochel. Then he should turn around before he takes a bite out of his sandwich. So it's just that it shouldn't be in mamish, in the face of the dead. Ve'eno mesav va'ochel. Ve'eno ochel basar ve'eno shosa yayin. Now we know that this guy is in onain, right? He's in the pre-shiva period, so therefore we know he can't live it up. He's not allowed to recline when eating. He's not allowed to eat meat, and he's not allowed to drink wine. Ve'ein mevarech, ve'ein mezamein, ve'ein mevarchen alav, ve'ein mezamen alav. Furthermore, he cannot lead Birkas Hamazon for others. He cannot lead the Zimun, and he's not allowed to have other people be motzi him in Birkas Hamazon, nor can people count him as part of the Zimun, because he's completely patur in mitzvahs. Upatur mikriya shema min atfila mikol mitzvahs amur spatar. He's exempt from all mitzvahs, including kriya shema, davening, and tefillin, and all other mitzvahs. Shabbos, and then the Brisa says that on Shabbos, what is this onein who's got the corpse in front of him supposed to do? Then Mesa va'ochel basar v'shosei. And then, since the laws of Aninus don't apply to him because there's nothing more for him to do because it's Shabbos, so then he's allowed to recline when he eats. He's allowed to eat meat. He's allowed to drink wine. Umavarich umazanan umavarchan mazanan alav, and he's allowed to bench. And he's allowed to lead the zimun, and other people can be motzi him in benching and count him as part of the zimun. V'chayiv b'kriya shema uv'tfila. He's obligated in kriya shema and in davening. And the word tefillin is problematic because there's no tefillin on Shabbos, so some girsos take it out. Uv'chol mitzvahs amurs b'torah. He's obligated in all other mitzvahs that are written in the Torah.
He wouldn't get no leave.
That's an interesting shaila, not discussed by the Gemara, but we don't give an onein and aliyah. No. Rabbi Gamliel Omer mitoch shenischayiv be'elu nischayiv bekulan. It comes along Rabbi Gamliel and he says something a little bit cryptic. He says this guy, because he's obligated in other mitzvahs, he's obligated in all mitzvahs. Now it seems like that's what the Tana Kama was saying as well. So ba'amar Rabbi Yochanan tashmish amita ika beinayu. So Rabbi Yochanan just clarified that what's the machlokus between the Tana Kama and Rabbi Gamliel? The answer is it permitted to have intimacy with one's wife on Shabbos when you're in Onei? The Tana Kama says no, and Rabbi Gamliel says yes. Once the laws of Aninus no longer apply because it's Shabbos, then everything is okay. So my lav b'hakam iflagi. Demar savar yesh avelus b'Shabbos, umar savar ein avelus b'Shabbos. Let's suggest that this is the machlokas. The Tana Kama says that there is some remnant of avelus on Shabbos, even though it's alleviated, but it's not completely eliminated. And Rabbi Gamliel says no, that it's completely eliminated, and that's why tashmish is permitted. So the Gemara says, is this not a proof that this machlokes between the Judean and Galilean rabbis is based in this brisa? The Gemara says no. Mimai. Not necessarily so. Dilma adkan lo ka'amar tanakama hasam ela mishum de mesam mutalafanav. Aval hacha de ein mesam mutalafanav lo. Maybe the Tanakama only makes his argument that you're restricted in having tashmish because you're right there in front of the corpse. And that's why you can't be intimate with your wife. But maybe once the burial is finished, he would permit on Shabbos to have tashmish. And I'll look at it and I can look at it the other way also. V'ad kan lo kamer Rabbi Gamliel hasam da'kati lo chalavelus alei. Aval hacha l'chalavelus alei hachanami. Or alternatively, look at it from the other direction. Maybe Rabbi Gamliel only gives you a carte blanche to do whatever you want, even tashmish, because you're just an onin, you're not sitting shiva yet. But maybe once you start shiva, maybe Rabbi Gamliel would restrict you. So therefore, since this price is talking about aninus on Shabbos, and it's not talking about avelus on Shabbos, it's apples and oranges, and you cannot adduce anything from the Mishnah to support the fact that this machlokus is based in a brisa. Okay, we're going to go a little bit further just because we have so much time. Ba'amine Rabbi Yochanan mishmuel. So Rabbi Yochanan asked Shmuel the following question. Yesh avelus b'Shabbos or ein avelus b'Shabbos? So now keep in mind the names here. Rabbi Yochanan is asking Shmuel, what's the halacha? Is there avelus on Shabbos to the point where dvar b'shabbatzina, that things that are private, like intimacy with one's wife, are forbidden? So Amar lei ein avelus b'Shabbos. He says no, there's no avelus whatsoever on Shabbos. So Yasvi Rabbanan Kamei Rav Papa uKa'amri Mishmei de Shmuel Avel Sheshimei Shmitas B'Mei Ev Avelo Chayev Misa. So the rabbis were sitting in front of Rav Papa, and they said in the name of Shmuel that an Avel who has relations on Shabbos during Shiva is Chayev Misa. Now here they seem to be misquoting Shmuel, because Shmuel had said that it's permitted. Shmuel said that there is no restriction on the Shabbos of Shiva. So Amar le Rav Papa. So Rav Papa said back to them, Asur Itmar u'mishmei Rabbi Yochanan Itmar. So first of all, guys, no one ever said that you're Chayiv Misa, that you're liable for the death penalty if you have tashmish with your wife during Shiva. it was only said that it was usher. And furthermore, Shmuel never said it because we just saw that Shmuel paskin that it's permitted. So it must have been Rabbi Yochanan, like Tosfos points out, that even though Rabbi Yochanan had asked Shmuel the question, Rabbi Yochanan didn't accept Shmuel's answer, and he decided to paskin on his own that it's usher. And if there's anything that you heard from Shmuel, it must have been as follows: Amar of Tachlifa bar Avimi Amar Shmuel, Avel shelo para v'shelo pireim chayiv misa. That if an Avel does not let his hair grow wild and he doesn't rend his clothing, that kind of person is chayiv misa. And here I believe we're talking about misa bidei shamai, a heavenly death penalty. No one's suggesting that we would execute a person just because he got a haircut during Shiva. But how do we know this? How do we know that this is a very, very serious offense? Shenemar roshechem al tifra'u vigdeichem lo sifromu v'lo samusu v'gomer. Because when Moshe speaks to Aaron, he says, you, the Kohanim, since you need to do the avoda, even though Nadav and Avihu have just died, and you're all Avelim, but nevertheless, you are not allowed to let your hair grow long. You're not allowed to rend your garments, lest you die. So what we see from here is that they are the exception to the rule. Ha-acher shelo para v'shelo pireim chayiv misa. So you can infer from that the opposite would be true for a regular person who's not the Kohen doing the avoda. That if you're not the Kohen doing the avoda for the inaugural of the Mishkan, so then if you do get a haircut and you don't rend your garments, so then you do get misa. It's only Aaron and his sons who would get misa, but everyone else would be just the opposite. That if they let their hair grow long and they don't rend their garments, they don't get misa. So if they do let their hair, if they do get a haircut or they don't rend their garments, the opposite will also be true, that they do get misa. Amar Rafram Bar Papa Tana be'Evel Rabasi. We have a brisa in what's called the Medrash of Evel Rabasi. Rashi is also known as Maseches Machos. That Avel Asul L'Shamish Mitas B'Mei Avelo. That an Avel is not allowed to have relations on the Shabbos of his Shiva. There was once a Maisa where a person violated that law, and he had relations, and as a result, his divine punishment was the pigs dragged his body in the street. And some say it was either a part of his body, Rashi says, and some say that it was his entire body that the pigs schlepped through the street, just to show that this person had abused with his body the laws of proper mourning. And this is where we'll hold it for today on that beautiful thought. You have